We're going to begin our discussion of Artifact by talking about something called component registration. Now, components are what drives the whole Artifact ecosystem, and we'll certainly get familiar with the terminology that Artifact uses to describe the different operations inside it. So here's what we're going to see in this particular section of the course. First of all, I'll present a scenario, a very simple scenario with a couple of dependencies, and I'll begin by presenting it without any dependency injection at all, so we're going to just be doing things manually. Then we'll go and learn how to register types using the different ways in which Artifact provides. The first of these ways is to register so-called reflection components, probably the most common way of actually registering types. Then we're going to talk about something called default registrations. This is the idea of discussing how Artifact picks which component to inject in and how it actually makes the decisions. We'll talk about the choice of constructor here. So that's if you have a class with multiple constructors, how does Artifact know which constructor needs to be called to instantiate a particular dependency? Then we're going to take a look at instance components. That is when instead of getting the dependency injection framework to actually inject components, you have predefined components of your own that you want to inject. This is also possible. We'll take a look at Lambda expression components, which provide the maximum flexibility in terms of initializing the dependencies. And finally, we'll take a look at something of a niche subject, the idea of open generic components, which you might also encounter in your exploitation of the dependency injection frameworks. So let's talk a little bit about the terminology that you need to be aware of when dealing with Artifact. The first and most important term is a component. Now, a component is simply a chunk of code that you write which declares the services that a particular class provides and the dependencies it consumes. Remember, it's all about classes depending upon other classes, and the term component basically says that inside our container we have this configuration that a particular class requires a certain set of services and it provides a certain set of services as well. Now, speaking of services, a service is quite simply a contract between somebody which provides functionality and some component which consumes functionality. So you can think of a service as, for example, an interface. So let's say you have logging, you have an iLog interface, and then you have some concrete implementations like, let's say, a console log or an SMS log or an email log. Well, the iLog in this case is treated as a service, and we can specify specifically which component provides this particular service. In addition, we have a very well-known term of dependency. That's a service which is required by a particular component. Remember, we're dealing with systems where components depend on other components, so a dependency in this case might be something present in the constructor. So you might have a constructor where there is a parameter, and this parameter is treated as a dependency, and these dependencies are fulfilled by the container. So the container is quite simply an object or a class which manages the components to make up the application. The container is the thing which kind of builds your application, fulfilling all the relevant dependencies.